What's up, New Hope family? Welcome to the Grow Podcast. My name is David. With me, as always, is Pastor Leo. We are here to help you take a next step in your relationship with Jesus. We're so glad you're here. Hello and welcome to episode 111 of the Grow Podcast. So glad that you are here, New Hope family. Pastor Leo, I'm glad that you're here as well.
¿Cómo está, everyone?
Hello.
Hello.
And ¿cómo está?
¿Cómo está?
I haven't tried Tagalog word
It's been
in
a bit,
little while because Daniel made fun of me. And
Oh, do not listen to him.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Right.
I'm excited for episode 111.
Mm-hmm.
Just,
Triple one.
3 ones in a row. It just looks clean.
Yes.
I like it. And you've prepared like a whole party. We have a really special episode today. So you go ahead, take it away, Pastor Lee.
Yeah.
No? Oh.
All right. I did bring something.
You did. You have been. I see. There's more food here, which I'm excited for.
Mm-hmm.
I am a little full at the moment, so I hope it's something I enjoy. Because I feel like eating something I don't enjoy when full will be much more unpleasant than
this one is
eating
more
on
of a
empty stomach.
dessert.
Oh, all right. It's perfect for being
It's
full.
called tupig. Two.
I'm more of a one pig guy, personally. Michael's laughing, and I'm so happy. He's laughing in disgust.
You got him
I didn't know you could laugh in disgust, but Michael just did, and I'm very proud. I hope everyone at home is also laughing in disgust. Two pig.
Interestingly, there's no pork.
No pork in the two pig. Last week we had pork in the adobo,
which was very good.
Adobo,
yes.
That was very good. We were talking before we started recording. It's interesting that I am much taller than you, Pastor Leo. Would you agree? But our mics end up at about the same level because I slouch during the podcast. I lean forward, lean into the microphone, hold myself up, and slouch. And Pastor Leo's over here, just Mr. Posture, just so fancy. Hello, everybody, and welcome.
Andy keeps reminding me to sit straight, so yes.
I think... I don't know. Maybe Andy has more faith in you than my wife has in me, or she just gave up a long time ago. She hasn't said a word about my posture on the Grow Podcast. But
you need to sit up straight, so yeah.
You definitely win the posture game. Comment, let us know those of you who watch the video podcast.
When I watch him, he's more like leaned back. And
he was more. So we got these nice arms on the mic. So every once in a while, when you really get going, I go all the way back here.
Right.
And then sometimes I go to respond. And my mic's still up there, so if you ever hear this noise, it sounds like I'm really far away. It's because I forgot to come back up to my microphone to talk to Pastor Leo. Well, let's check out our food for that. Let's check out this two-pig.
Okay, so this comes from...
Is it TWOPIG?
It's TU.
TUPIG.
Yeah, two-pig.
Two-pig.
Right. This comes from the northern part of the Philippines.
Okay. Do you come from the northern part of the... Oh, boy, that is not what I was expecting when you said dessert. It looks like corn stalks.
I don't know if Michael can have this because it's shredded coconut with glutinous rice flour.
Oh, then...
It's just the sticky kind of rice, but it's still rice. Rice is fine, so it should be fine.
Okay.
Then. So, yeah, there's no flour in this one. It's just... They just call it glutinous rice flour. Because it's the sticky kind. So, wrapped in banana leaves.
Michael says, I don't know, but I'm going to eat it. He'll let us know later if it had gluten in it or not.
The aroma that you're smelling right now is from the banana leaves.
Yeah, okay.
They put it on the grill, so it...
All right. Open it up for us. Show me what to do here.
Okay, so...
With the two
just take one, and then you just open it up.
Michael, you better show yours to the camera here. Oh boy! Oh! It's like a
rice cake kind of thing.
Interesting. I don't know if they can see that. That is not what I expected.
So it's soft and it's chewy.
Ooh, chewy. That I'm a little scared. Michael's excited. Two pig. Are you going to join us? There's a third one in there.
Yeah, later.
Okay. There's a really familiar smell to this to me, and I can't...
Coconut. It's coconut
Oh, it's very chewy.
It is very chewy. So yeah. It's more of a delicacy that comes from the northern part of the Philippines. So
it doesn't have a super strong flavor.
No, it doesn't.
I like it. Michael. We get a thumbs up from Michael, too.
We got a thumbs up
I
from
think
Michael.
the only miss so far was the weird, powdery, what was that called again?
The polvoron?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, the Christmas time
Right.
candy or whatever. Only because it was the driest thing I have ever eaten. Like, I didn't even mind the taste of it. It was just so sweet and so dry at the same time.
Sweet and dry.
This is kind of the opposite. Very faint sweetness.
It's very
And
chewy.
the texture's odd because it's super chewy.
Right.
But, like, it feels light, I guess.
That's true.
Michael's playing with his. Michael was not taught to not play with this. Although, honestly, it feels like something my kids would play with.
Right.
Like it's like almost like slime or
It's
like silly putty.
Yeah.
It could be really warm silly
It's
putty.
very Play-Doh.
I like it. No, so you had to reheat this, but when it's
Yes.
fresh, is it the exact same texture?
It's
pretty much?
the same
Okay.
texture. Like Andy taught me how to reheat that. You wrap it in paper towel wrapped soaked in water.
I just realized I was chewing into the microphone again, which I promised a couple weeks ago that I wouldn't do again.
So yeah, it's
Too big.
you soak it. You soak the paper towel, you wrap it, and then you microwave it. So the steam.
I like it.
Yeah,
It's nice.
it's good. Andy made that. So
Shout out to Andy again. I'm sure she will comment about us trying more
Right.
foods. This one, so like it looks so good that until you feel the texture of it, which I actually didn't do, like because I took my first bite, I was only holding the banana leaf,
right.
so I didn't have time to get scared of the texture. I would have been very scared of this texture. That is bizarre. Like that's not food.
Yeah.
Like come on, what are we doing here?
It's very Play-Doh-y.
Yeah, man, but it's really good. I like it.
That's
Well,
good.
I hope this
We'll
tradition
let Hattie try the third
ooh, that she will be very happy about that.
Yeah.
What was that? 2 episodes ago, she came in here with us just to eat the food that you brought. I love this tradition.
Yes.
This new Grow podcast tradition. I hope it continues beyond Romans.
Heard that, Andy?
I hope that one day, even when you and I are no longer doing the Grow podcast together, somehow this part of the Grow podcast continues,
Right.
where Andy just sends food for me and Michael through you. Well, that was wonderful.
That's
As
good.
is the book of Romans.
As is the book of
Whoa!
Romans. There
What a
we
transition.
go. Yeah.
That was a
Segue.
lobby style segue that we have at New Hope here. But non-jokingly, this has been an amazing study on the book of Romans so far. I've really enjoyed it. This
Yep.
will be the 9th episode that we've dove into Romans because so far it's taken us 2 episodes to get through each chapter.
That's right.
So we're starting Romans 5 today. First 11 verses, 1 through 11.
Yes.
Hopefully you've read. If you haven't done that yet, we encourage you to pause. It's just 11 verses. You can read that really quick, and it will make everything that Pastor Leo is about to talk about just make way more sense than if you haven't read it.
Yes.
And then similarly, pretty much every week, and if not for sure every week, we're referring to things that we've already learned because Paul did not write this in chapters broken up into chapters and verses. It's just a letter, and so it builds on itself.
That's right.
So to get the best understanding of these 11 verses, it helps to know the 4 chapters that come before them. So
and we refer to them from time to time.
yeah, that also happens.
Yes.
So definitely encourage you to check that out before we get started here. That's the great thing about a podcast. We're not live. You can pause us. You could pause me right in the middle of this sentence, and I will pick up right where I left off. I promise. Pause right now, and I will pick up right where I left off. I hope somebody did that. I really hope. I want there to be at least one. If you did that, will you please let me know? I really want one person to have just hit pause real quick.
Right.
Just to see, are they live? Like maybe they are live. We're not. So why don't you, Pastor Leo, why don't we get started? Talk to us a little bit about kind of like we always do, the main ideas or points that we should walk away from these 11 verses.
Sure thing. All right. And speaking of referring to past episodes, in episode 3, so pause.
I told you I wasn't lying.
Right.
I wasn't lying.
See? It's like pause and then play again.
Okay
So in episode 3, Paul talked about how God has declared us innocent because of our faith in Jesus. We have the right standing with God because of our faith in Jesus. Believing in Jesus' death and resurrection, God declares us now innocent of all charges, justified by our faith in him. In chapter 4, which is episode 109. So episode 107 and 108 is chapter 3. Episode 109, chapter 4, Paul used Abraham to illustrate what justification by faith looks like. That also includes episode 110.
Yep. So
here in episode 111 and the next, Paul now tells the Romans and us that because we now have peace with God through Jesus' sacrifice, we can rejoice in our suffering, knowing that God will use the troubles we face to make us more like Jesus. We talked about this previously last week when we said that some people think that just because they have faith in Jesus and then they mess up, that means, and then the devil's going to show that and then it's going to say, see, you're not really a Christian. You're not really a believer. But the thing is, God will use the troubles that we face to make us more like Jesus.
So we're going to talk about how much we're supposed to love suffering today. That's great, Pastor Leo. We're having another dark week of the podcast. But that's, we talked a little bit last week about when we take verses out of context.
Right.
And I think this is one where we do kind of in the opposite way we talked last week. We take this one out of context and we hate it.
Right.
I know I do. I'm like I take no joy in my suffering. This is terrible.
Right.
And this also, it's important to note the difference between joy and happiness as well.
That's
I don't know if that's something you were planning on talking about. We've definitely dove into that on the Grow podcast in the past with Pastor Mike. But there's a difference between happiness, which is an emotion that we feel.
Yes.
And joy, which is more of a choice.
That is true.
But are we having another dark episode? Are we talking about suffering for the next 25 minutes here, Pastor Leo? I don't know if I have it in me today.
For the next 10 episodes, we will be talking about
boy.
No, I'm just kidding. No. Not necessarily. There is a saying in English that goes, in this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes.
Sure.
And suffering. So death and taxes.
Both of those would definitely fall under suffering.
That's 100%. True. 100%. Now, some say that came from Mark Twain or Ben Franklin or Daniel Defoe.
I thought it was Bugs Bunny.
Bugs Bunny. Or Yoda. Let's bring back Yoda.
He was last week. Yoda was. If you weren't with us last week, Yoda joined us. So definitely go check it out.
Briefly. He joined us briefly. So all I know is death and taxes are both not pleasant. We just talked about that.
I agree.
It's not pleasant at all. So suffering is a part of life. Now, we're not going to go dark. We're just going to talk about reality. So
reality can be kind of dark sometimes.
Reality can be dark sometimes, but we're not going to focus on the darkness of it. So, but many people, including us Christians, especially when we're in the middle of our suffering, we immediately think that it's a sign of God's anger. And it's true. Sometimes when we're going through something that's really tough or really challenging or really dark, we just think that we did something. We did something to anger God. We did something to mess up. This is God punishing us for something that we did, whether or not we know about it. And we're gonna think this is why I'm going through this right now, because I did something wrong or I messed up. I have a sin that I did not confess or something like that. And some people even say that. You get sick, or you're sick because you did not have or you have a sin that you didn't confess about, or something like that. So, Paul's words help us think rightly about the suffering that we're going through. So,
and clearly, he again nothing in the Bible is there by accident. Paul's talking about suffering, and it applies to us today. But for looking at it in the context of when it was written and to whom it was written, there was a lot of suffering going on for believers. And as much as you and I think would love to do another nerdy deep dive on history, we've already talked about this a lot in the last 8 episodes. So go back and listen to those if you haven't, because there was a lot going on, and it wasn't just in Rome. Now, technically, it was in the Roman Empire, because the Roman Empire was pretty much everywhere at this point. And there's certain, like the good news of the gospel hadn't really spread out. Of, at least in a significant way, out of that area yet.
They didn't have copies of the Bible back then.
There are no, yeah,
Right.
and
it was still being written.
Like the church tradition is interesting, like about where all the different disciples went, and some of them there is tradition that they went over like to Asia, which would have been out of the Roman Empire.
That's right.
I forget which disciple. One of them's thought to maybe have made it all the way to Britain, which part of it was under Roman rule and part of it wasn't. But anyway, regardless, there was persecution going on everywhere for these believers. They would have been very familiar with suffering. This wouldn't have been like not that everything's perfect for Christians here in America. Like we have difficulties in our lives too, but it was a very different situation than what like you and I are experiencing living in Williston, North Dakota.
That's true.
As followers of Jesus, this would have been front and center in their minds.
That's right. And this ties in with your question in episode 109. Again, if you haven't watched it, pause and go back and watch it. Many of the believers that time may have been asking Paul something like, if we're right standing with God now, why don't we feel like it? Why don't we feel like we're in the right standing with God? Why do I feel like the same way I felt yesterday? Why am I still hurting? Why am I still suffering? If this is what Christianity is all about, why are we still going through hard times?
And I think, sorry to interrupt real quick, but more nerdy history stuff, but just how amazing God is. We talk like they're already would be very familiar with that persecution, that suffering, but it's about to get so much worse.
Oh, yes.
For the Christian. We talked about a few episodes ago about how, like, when this was written, Nero was just approaching the height of his power, right when he was about to really go nuts.
It was just getting started.
And he was, if not the worst for Christians, top 3 of all the the early Roman emperors.
That's true.
So, not only is this going to fit for them in their current context, but as they kept this and it continued to be such an important letter to the church, to the early church, man, this would have been such an important part as that persecution, that suffering they were going through just started to ramp up.
That's right.
In the coming years after this was written. Not by accident. Again,
not by accident. It's like somebody intended to do it.
It's almost like God ordained the words. Sorry, please continue.
All right, so in chapter 5, we start with the word therefore. Now, Pastor Mike talked about this before.
Yep.
Therefore means that Pastor Mike, not Pastor Mike, but Paul is building up on everything that he talked about previously. Pastor Mike taught us that when Paul uses this word, everything that happened before, everything that he talked about before is the foundation of that therefore. So now he uses therefore. So the past 4 chapters are the foundation of that therefore. So Paul now talks about the results or the benefits of us having a right standing with God because of our faith instead of our works. One of the benefits is peace. So I told you, it's not that dark.
I like peace more than suffering, just to clarify. Let us know in the comments if you don't.
Right.
Pastor Leo will set up a pastoral care session for you and maybe find you a therapist.
Yes. But anyway, so one of the benefits is peace. Now, if it's because of works, I only have peace until I mess up, right? Now, if it's because if I'm in a right standing with God, because let's say because I'm not lying, the moment I lie, I don't have peace anymore. If I'm in a right standing with God because I observe the Sabbath, for example, the moment I don't, for whatever reason, whether I intended it or whether because work needed me or for anything, then I don't have peace anymore because that is broken. So if I mess up, I don't have peace. I have to keep working hard to achieve and maintain that peace. So if you're noticing, it's very tedious. That kind of Christianity is just so tiring. And I have no assurance, but because it is by faith, even though I mess up, I still have that assurance. I mess up. There's a difference between messing up and intentionally turning your back on something. So you have peace. You have the assurance whether you mess up, you're gonna mess up from time to time. We're just humans. We make mistakes. Well, we talked about that last episode, but that's a different kind of mistake. We make mistakes. Unintentionally, we make mistakes. Sometimes intentionally, we make mistakes. Abraham did the same thing. But because of our faith, we have the assurance. So we have peace. The second result is hope. We talked about this before. Many people try to escape their reality with different stuff.
Sure.
You got drugs, you got alcohol, you got gambling. There are so many isms out there that people use to escape their reality, but we have hope. As Christians, we realize that the world is corrupt. It's true. The world is dark. It is corrupt. Our governments have failed us. We have not and we will not discover the solution for world peace, no matter what the Miss Universe contestants will say.
What if they go up and they say, this is a dream of mine. She goes up, hey, I'm whoever from wherever. My goal is world peace, and I've figured out a solution. We get rid of every human.
That is one.
That's the dark Miss Universe candidate that I can support. I would love that. I would crack up.
But yeah, but because we... That's so awesome. I'd love to hear that. Okay. But anyway, but because we have hope in Jesus, we can face the reality of life. We can face the reality of life that it's dark. We have problems. We suffer. There are things that we go through that we don't understand. And yet, we still rejoice. And we talked about joy earlier, and it's a choice, and we can still rejoice because we know that when God comes, when Jesus comes back, we're going to live in a world of peace. So we rejoice in the hope of God's glory. It may sound like Paul is going dark. See, he actually isn't. It's just he's just saying that suffering is a part of life.
Okay, but you avoided using the word suffering there, whether intentionally or so. Now tie it into suffering for me, because you talked a lot about peace and hope, and that sounded great. But so tie that all into us rejoicing in our suffering.
And if you notice, that's how people try to discredit the Bible or Paul sometimes. Like, you're talking about suffering, you're talking about peace. Now here he's not, and stuff like that. But how does this tie in with our rejoicing in our suffering? Well, we rejoice because we now know that in every trial that we face, in every suffering that we face, in every problem that we face, in whatever it is that we're going through, there is an opportunity for God to show himself, to manifest himself, and to work in our lives. So there is suffering, but in that suffering is an opportunity for God to make something happen that we will see that he is at work. So when there are problems, we have hope. We know that we just have to wait on God. And as we wait on God, we experience and we start seeing him at work. And as we experience God's faithfulness in working out our problems, our hope increases and the cycle continues. And we rejoice in our suffering. And this is the part where we rejoice in our suffering. We rejoice in our suffering because we know that it is another opportunity for God to work and for us to experience God's love and grace.
I love the process that he kind of walks us through in verses 3, 4, and 5.
Right.
Some of my favorite verses in all of Romans. I'm just going to read it quick. But not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope.
That's right.
And hope does not put us to shame because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. And so it's not specifically the suffering that we love, right? It's not this terrible thing happened. Like, that was great. Like, it's this process that because we have God, that suffering isn't the extent of our experience.
That's right.
Right? That suffering sucks.
It does.
And God is aware that it sucks. Like, Jesus came down and suffered as much, if not more, than any of us could ever imagine suffering.
Right.
To make sure that he knew what it was like to suffer for us and take that from us. So God knows that suffering sucks. It's the process that he takes us on from that suffering that's so good. That brings us to that hope that you were giving, that you were talking about. Gives us that peace.
And one thing, there are people who say that it's wrong for us to tell God that, you know what, God, this sucks. I mean,
I've been wrong a lot then in my 35 years of existence.
Read the Psalms.
Yeah. For real. That's
Yep.
that's why I love the Psalms.
If people tell you that you shouldn't be telling God that you don't like what you're going through, or it's wrong for you to question God, or to say that, God, why are you doing this, or this hurts, I don't like it.
Yep.
The Psalms are chock full of verses saying that exact thing. So it's not wrong. It's just that you have that hope, and you know that, yes, it sucks, but you have a hope.
Yeah.
So, okay.
And then Paul gets us to the idea in verse 6 when he says that Jesus died for us while we were still weak, while we were still helpless.
That's true. And this is how we can understand this better, because sometimes that's confusing. It's like, helpless, how? So, God did not wait for any of us to respond to an altar call. There was no altar call during that time, or to get baptized just so he can start loving us. And that's
just
one
so
of
important.
so great, right?
Yep.
So, and if we think about it, that is how God is just so awesome. He didn't wait. He was not waiting for, okay, I'll work on the lives of people who get baptized, or I'll work on the lives of people who respond to an altar call, or say they love me. Jesus did not declare on the cross that his death is exclusive to the members of the Church of Superman or the congregation of Yoda's Witnesses.
Are those real?
Real they are.
Or to Wesleyans.
Or to Wesleyans, right?
There's nothing magical about being Wesleyan, you're saying?
There's nothing magical about any of it. The Bible does not say that God displayed his love for us in that while we were still sinners, or the Bible does say that while we were still sinners, Jesus died for us, which is that's one of the most beautiful verses that we have here, verse 8. And that's why I am helpless. I have nothing to boast about. I have nothing to show that I'm better than anyone. I have nothing to prove that shows that I am at a different level, or I am like Abraham, built different. There's nothing. Jesus didn't die for us because he saw that we're great at following rules. Jesus didn't die for us because he saw that we're perfect in observing this tradition or this practice. It wasn't because we're great podcasters.
It definitely wasn't because we're great podcasters.
No, not at all.
I'm glad my salvation is not tied to me being a great podcaster.
Goodness, right? So Jesus died for us way back when we were in an ungodly state. We are unaware of the fact that God loves us. I mean, imagine that. God died even before you were aware of him. And some people are unaware that God exists, and they're just in a different kind of reality, or in a different kind of situation, and God, even for them, God died for them, and he wasn't waiting for anything. So God does not love me less now because I keep messing up, despite the fact that I am his child. And that goes for you as well, and for all of us. God will not love us less because you're now supposed to be Christians and you're still lying, or you're still beating the red light, or you're still over speeding, or you're still messing up, and you're supposed to be Christians now. You're supposed to be perfect. No, God did not say in any verse in the Bible that we should be perfect. I mean, Jesus did say, be perfect. Follow me, though. That's what he said, right?
I mean, we're clearly supposed to strive to be like that, but he's very aware that we're not going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in verse 11, Paul says that we also have joy because we are now one with God in relationship through Jesus. That's just the beauty of it.
Yeah, it is.
It is just, and again, that's why this is not dark at all. This is, if you think that these verses are dark because Paul is talking about suffering, it's not, because again, we talked about this earlier. It's an opportunity for God to work, and if we're gonna give it up to God, he will use it. But there are people who, because I'm suffering, I need to find a way through it. This is, I have a solution. I have a way out. I have the answers. And if we do that, God's and we talked about this before too. God's gonna give us up to our own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna say corruption because that's we're going dark again. But if we're gonna give it up to God, then He will use it, and He will work through us and in us, and use that for His glory. So, okay, things to wrestle with this week. And again, this will be in the description in the podcast notes. Number 1. Let's reflect on a time when God used the troubles that we were facing to produce endurance, character, and hope in us. There were times in our lives when we went through something. The troubles that we were facing back then produced endurance in us, and we learned to wait more patiently on God, or produced character, a better character, or a deeper level of hope in us. Number 2. How could we use what we learned about God today to remind ourselves to rejoice in the troubles that we are now facing, or that we will face when they come? How can we use what we learned about God today to remind ourselves of that fact? Number 3. What might change in our lives, in your life, if you truly understood the fact that you are no longer weak and helpless as a child of God? Because once you realize that, you come to a level of understanding and a level of hope and a level of joy and rejoicing, even if you are going through something right now. Once you get to that point, you are no longer weak and you're no longer helpless as a child of God. You are God's child. And that's a reality that sometimes a lot of us miss. And we just say that because it's church talk, that I'm a child of God. But once you realize what that means, that brings about a deeper kind of understanding. And number 4, how can you more fully depend on the Holy Spirit as your helper?
And then we're going to finish Romans 5 next week as well. Romans 5, so verses 12 through 21. And we say it most weeks here. Some weeks I forget to say it, but we say it a lot on the Grow podcast. Growth always starts with the next step. Something we really believe at New Hope, and I know it's in the DNA at PH Church as well. But our whole New Hope network is that there's a next step for all of us. There's always a next step. It doesn't matter how long you've been following God for. You have a next step. Even if you're not following Him yet and you're searching, there's a next step for you too. So,
but this step is yours to take, though.
For sure. And so that's why these things that Pastor Leo gives us at the end of every episode really encourage you to make sure they're not just, this isn't just a thing you listen to for 30 minutes or last week, 45 minutes every single week.
I blame Yoda for it.
Yeah, it was Yoda's fault. And then you move on. But we're actually putting the things that we learn into practice as we're reading through Romans. If there's anything that should be clear to us, it's that our faith should be producing actions, right? Especially this part of Romans, I should say. We should be learning that our faith, if it's real, that like there's fruit's going to come from it. There's going to be things that are we're changing, we're growing, we're active. And so let's make sure that, it's 4 things to wrestle with. And by the way, every week I keep waiting for you to throw in like some wrestler, things to wrestle with this week.
Yep, things
Hulk
to
Hogan,
wrestle with
something like that. And it hasn't happened yet. Now I've spoiled it. We should have talked about it. We should have had a production meeting off camera. But these things to wrestle with every week, let's make sure that they're not just, like
you wrestle with this, brother.
Leo that was pretty good. Leo hit on them, and I don't even think about them until next week when I listen to the next episode. It's great that you're here listening to this, but if nothing that we learn from this impacts our lives in any way, then this is just one of those traditions that we've been talking about, right? Well, every week I listen to the Grow podcast so I can check it off my list. I got a little bit holier today because I listened to the Grow podcast.
That's true.
Let's make sure that they're actually impacting our lives. So thank you, Pastor Leo. This was really awesome. I've been loving these. And again, not just for the food. Thank you, Andy, for the 2-pig.
2-pig.
I would really like to invent a food that is 1 pig. And so Michael liked it even more this time. There's no laughter this time, just disappointment this time from Michael. But we will be inventing 1 pig, and it's going to be delicious. But thanks to all of you for joining us. We love you, New Hope family. Make sure that you're joining us every week. New episodes go up every Monday. And catch up. If you listen to this one and you missed chapters 1 through 4, take the rest of the week and listen to those, and then come back for us for episode 112, where we're going to finish off Romans 5. But yeah, we love you. Make sure you're joining us, by the way, at at one of our gatherings, whether you're a PH Church person, you can join them online as well.
Yes.
Or if you're a part of the one of our New Hope churches, whether Tioga or Williston or online at New Hope here, make sure you're joining us on the weekends as well. The Grow Podcast is awesome, but it's certainly not meant to replace being a part of that community.
That's right.
And so make sure that you're being in community somewhere too. I don't feel like I say that as often anymore, because when we were, like building off of what the sermon was, it was like, well, yeah, make sure you're here on the weekend so that, but that is no less important now just because the Grow Podcast is
That's right.
a study on Romans.
In fact, it should enhance it.
For sure. Mm-hmm. Yep. So make sure you're joining us, or maybe you have a local church as well.
That's right.
And that's totally fine if you have your own church and then you're joining us on the Grow Podcast for the study on Romans. That's also great too. But being in that community of believers, we grow best when we're in community, and so definitely find a way to connect with a community of believers, and then join us next week. We love you, New Hope family. We'll see you next time.
Ingat.